All right, hello, welcome to the Off by One Security stream. Where are we at today? Friday, March 7th. We've got Ryan Chapman here as our guest today. So wait for some folks to join. It's always the case, as I say every week, where there's like right when you start the stream, I think there's some latency as to when StreamYard actually connects to LinkedIn and Twitter, X, and YouTube. So a couple people have complained on the replays of a show, or I'll call it a show, haha, a replay of the stream, that the intro part is like cut off sometimes. So if you're listening to this later on and you hear me just running my mouth right now, just know that that's why I'm doing it. All right, so today we are going to discuss an interesting topic that a lot of folks have been asking about on the Discord and elsewhere around, and I've heard plenty of people say this, where you'll hear people say that they think they're very stealthy, that they think that they're going undetected on the network when they're doing a red team exercise or a pen test or other engagement, because no one ever like alerts and says, hey, what are you doing? We caught you doing this thing. And sometimes, I guess anecdotally, I hate that word, but anecdotally, like in my experience, sometimes it's because they do see you, but they know you're doing a pen test, so they kind of leave you alone. But more times than not, it's been the case where they're just not doing a good job, they being the organization, monitoring the network. So they might have a SIM product and a SOC and dashboards and all that, but if they're not instrumenting the systems properly and collecting the right data and normalizing it and correlating it, all that fun stuff, you can certainly go undetected. And a lot of us, of course, we try to live off the land as much as possible, because mimicking behavior of a typical user is, of course, less likely to set off any alerts and get caught up. But I don't think it's the case, and we'll ask Ryan here, that we're just so good that we just sneak through the network and no one can see us, right? So we're going to talk a bit about that today. I guess, Ryan, if you can give a little background on yourself, that would be awesome for folks who don't know who you are.
Yep, can do. So my name is Ryan Chapman. Hello. I go by RJ_Chap, which is really funny because I've never gone by the name RJ. I just chose that as my Twitter account name, I don't know how many years ago. And then all of a sudden people started calling me RJ. And I was like, I don't like that name. Why are you calling me RJ? And they're like, because your name is RJ_, like you made that your name. So I've been doing digital forensics and incident response for about 13 years. I started in my, I call it hands-on security role with a security operations center at a very large organization. It was, they do government contracting. It's a construction, engineering, and procurement organization. And so right away, I was just jumped people say I jumped feet first. No, I jumped head first into dealing with APT groups. You know, they ran a bunch of nuclear silo, like all kinds of stuff, and national labs, nuclear stuff, and just seeing all that activity. Oh, I was hooked. I was there for about 7 years. I moved from the SOC to the CERT. I was doing some network security monitoring and then went to where I really belong, the DFIR team. Been doing malware analysis for about 12 years and absolutely love digging into binaries, scripts, whatever I can get my hands on, pull them apart. I moved out of that role and moved into incident response consulting. I did that for about 5 years, including a year where I currently work, which I'm not going to mention, but it's on LinkedIn, so whatever. But I work for a large firm that you recognize, and you can just look it on LinkedIn and go, oh, that's where he works. So I did IR there for a year, and then I recently moved over to the managed threat hunting team, where we basically hunt for the things that people, processes, and systems might otherwise not identify. So I've been doing DFIR hunting, threat intel, malware analysis, those types of things for quite a while now. I think I'm getting up there in age. Once you hit over 40, you're the old guy in the industry all of a sudden. And I ran a security conference called CactusCon for about 2 years. It's based in the Phoenix, Arizona area. I had to step away from it just because I was living like there's 25 hours in 8 days a week, to use, and then there weren't. There are not. So I also have a SANS course on ransomware. So I've been researching ransomware for the past 4 years extensively. And a lot of the stuff that I'll be talking about either came from ransomware cases or advanced persistent threat cases that I've either seen or other folks have kind of tuned me into over the years.
Yep. Awesome. Thanks. Super helpful. Yeah. So how long have you been teaching at SANS now?
About almost 5 years now.
5 years. Wow.
Yeah, I started with the reverse engineering malware course, and that led to questions being sent inbound to the instructors for their malware course, asking for information about ransomware. And that was a time 5 years ago, was a time where people were still kind of hyper focused on ransomware being like what we call now the payload, the ransomware binary. And so it was more of a, hey, from the malware standpoint, can you comment on these? And I was like, yeah, but let me comment rather from the incident response side of things, because it's a massive campaign and carried out like APTs and blah, 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 blah. So moved over from that into the course that, that I ended up writing over a year and a half, 2 years. Decided to be a solo author. That was a great idea on my behalf. And absolutely love it. I love interacting with people. I love being able to show the things that I've accumulated over 13 years, what works well. I don't come off to say I'm an expert on anything. In fact, I hate when people say I'm an expert in so-and-so. Stop it. You can allow other people to call you the expert. Come on with that. We stand on the shoulders of giants, and being involved in that community in the global IT and InfoSec, or whatever you want to call cybersecurity these days, it's just really fun. I love learning from other people, and I love opportunities like this. So I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, it's rare we have somebody on from the blue side or the DFIR side of the house. So got to play nice together.
Yeah.
I was just reading an article the other day. One of the things we talk a lot on this channel about is Windows virtualization-based security and exploit mitigations and all that kind of stuff to understand if we can circumvent them or how effective they are. HVCI and other areas like that. Conor McGar was just on. We were talking about that. And I just read an article about malware authors starting to figure out ways to exploit the behavior of virtualization-based security on Windows to hide malware in an isolated user mode process under the secure kernel. Have you seen much of that?
Yes, actually, the HVCI disallowed images is an option that some of the threat actors are using to basically disallow like EDRs and other security products from even running. So rather than using an EDR killer or silencing method, they're utilizing that context to basically just tell HVCI, hey, don't let this run. And so all of a sudden they're, able to do their stuff in the dark.
Interesting. Are you seeing is malware like, I used to do a lot of reverse engineering malware, but I haven't done it too much these days. Just vulnerability research consumes everything. But the same languages were always used, the same packers like UPX and all that kind of stuff. Is it still pretty much the same, or are we seeing a lot more malware in like Go and newer languages?
Yep, we're seeing a lot of stuff written in Go, which makes it very difficult, especially when they remove the version information from Go, because in your standard decompilers are like, what do I do with this? We're also seeing, funny enough, like PyInstaller, and basically just taking a Python script and packaging it up into an executable, a bloated large executable, 25, 30 megabytes a piece. You think that'd be very, very loud, right? I mean, it kind of is, because it's a big old chunk of data they're bringing into your environment. And then yet it's making it difficult for reversers because, for example, when you use PyInstaller, if you're using, I think it's currently 3.11 and upwards, there's no really good way in order to decompile it. So there are extractors for PyInstaller where you can pull out these scripts, the compiled scripts, the PYC files, and then from there, trying to decompile those. The industry hasn't really caught up with that yet. So one of the ways that I did that is I just used the disassembly feature. It's either DIS or DISM, one of the two, in Python, and basically get the assembly out from it, and then from I said assembly, but the bytecode out from it, and then from there put it into AI and say, hey, decompile this to like a Python script for me. Like, what is this actually doing? Sometimes that'll be helpful. Packers, we're seeing a lot of .NET stuff being used these days, which again, I used to love .NET malware. I would get super excited because it was so easy just to use something like dnspy or whatever other numerous tools out there to decompile, and you get great, not just intermediate language, but great source code. Well, not source code, but you know what I mean, looking source. And now some of the obfuscators are getting really, really good and are quite a pain in the rear end to reverse.
Yeah, I remember. I think we talked about this before, but that malware Jigsaw was an instance of it. But it was one of those ransomware as a service on the dark web where you could buy an instance of it and get your own keys and all that stuff and wallet and customize it. But the Jigsaw one, they used Confuser EX to obfuscate it. And luckily, there's no Fuser EX that you can use to deobfuscate it, because otherwise it'd be a nightmare. But it's always interesting when you take an MSIL, a binary, and you just load it into something like ILDASM or another one, and it just there's everything right there on the screen, the encryption key, the initialization vector, and all that. That was a pretty sad piece of ransomware, but it was cool for study.
It was. There's so many videos out there on, hey, here's how we just tell this thing that we paid. So it was always fun seeing those.
Yeah. Somebody commented your screen's freezing a bit. Yeah, we were talking about that a bit before the stream. We were trying to troubleshoot it. I think it might be something on Ryan's end, but the audio is fine. For the most part, everything's good, and we'll be doing screen sharing soon. So in case something locks up while he's showing something, just let us know, and we'll touch on it again. So I guess tell us a little bit about what you're going to show us today, what you're going to talk about.
Yes. Let's see. Your screen froze for me. I just popped my my network checker. Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yes.
There we go. I'm back.
Okay. Yeah, I can hear you.
All right, cool.
Are you there?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Okay, cool. Yeah. It's hard to tell because it's logging up a couple times. I guess, yeah. So go ahead and let us know a little bit about what you're going to be showing us today.
Yeah. So when it comes down to it, I 100% am in the camp that a lot of red teamers, adversary emulation folks, they go unseen, but in reality, they're not really going unseen. It's just that the teams are not exactly identifying them. And working for 5 years in incident response, I can tell you that I don't know how many incidents, we worked over the years where there were plenty of alerts in whatever system, their log aggregator, their SIM, their EDR/XDR, or whatever it might be, that, hey, go look right there. And they just don't see it, or they mark it as a false positive because they're not really sure exactly what they're looking at, especially when we're dealing with living off the land type of attacks where they just think, oh, that's an administrator doing administrative things, and not really. So Windows is an absolute snitch. It is constantly recording all the things that you're doing for positive purposes behind the scenes.
Telemetry, right?
Yeah, exactly. For many things like application caching, compatibility caching, which we call shim cache. I'll get into that coming up. Just an example of how many folders are you opening that have exes and DLLs inside, and what is Windows recording whenever you execute an executable. There's so much that's recorded, and it's also like in the digital forensics realm, we track things like shell bags, which are basically just in the registry and essentially just store window positions and icon, or I should say like display options and things like that for Windows. But it's one of the main things that we use in the DFIR realm in order to determine what a threat actor has interacted with, because we can see them navigating particular folders and files and things like that in that particular artifact. Whenever you open up.
Is it the shell bags that, like, if I plug a USB into a computer, it leaves that mark in the registry and you can see the files that were on that USB, even though it's not there anymore? Is that something else?
You can get it from there. Yeah. Okay. What your mount points to will load up and your enum will load up. You'll see the exact information about the USB with the serial number, when it was mounted, things of that nature, what drive letter it was mounted to. And then shimcache can even show that it was looking to see if anything might need to be shimmed, but oh, look, it's storing that conveniently in the registry for later review. So what I wanted to do is just kind of talk about some of the things that we do on the blue team, right? For analysis when an incident kicks off. What are the primary artifacts that we utilize? And we have, there's no obvious incident response playbook, but when it comes down to it, there's a number of artifacts that we check on almost every single case, and many of these can be manipulated. There's a lot of files that we'd like to check to see what they have in store for us, and many of those can be manipulated. So I'm going to start off by just saying that first and foremost, fileless is the way to go. All right. It's when it comes to persistence, when someone says, oh, this malware is completely fileless, what do you mean? Oh, well, it stores its data in the registry as a base64 encoded blob, and then it opens a run. Like, okay, wait. So it's stored in the registry, which is a registry key file sitting on disk. It's not fileless, right? But when I'm talking about fileless, I mean persistence. You're going to have to persist somewhere, right? But in terms of like whether you bring Cobalt Strike into an environment, for example, and you bring, say, a staged or stageless payload, whatever, right? One way is just to bring in the binary. Well, another way that threat actors and especially ransomware actors have been, utilizing fileless activity is to use MS Build to build it on the fly. And when you think about it, when you go in, for anyone who's never used Cobalt Strike, when you go in, there's a little attack menu at the top in your C2 in your team server, and you can choose generate payload. One of the most common payloads that we see is a PowerShell script. And that PowerShell script typically has shellcode within it, and it uses standard virtual alloc to, allocates a memory space. It pushes the shellcode into the buffer, and then it basically says, let's just use that, execute from there, pretty much. So in that regard, we're seeing threat actors do things like use MS Build, where they're still bringing in many times an XML file for the configuration of MS Build. But then once they execute that and have Cobalt Strike running into memory, and then from there, when they migrate to a process that they believe is not going to be identified or killed or whatnot, then they get rid of the XML file. So one of the things I'll be talking about later is getting rid of files and deleting files, because there are actually native methods that you can utilize to kind of hide your tracks by like zeroing out files before you delete them. Mm-hmm. For anyone who's not aware, on the forensic side of the house, when files are deleted, they're not deleted, especially in like an NTFS volume, right? Rather, they're simply marked in the master file table as, oh, that file no longer exists. It's not there. Don't point to it. But the data is still sitting on the disk. It doesn't go anywhere. It will potentially be overwritten if those nodes are then needed later. The sectors are overwritten by other files. But if you have a large drive, there's things that we have like file slack space. Say you have a file that's this big sitting at this node, and a new file that's this big is written. This data is most likely still sitting there on the disk. So we like to pull full physical images for forensic analysis versus like a logical image, which basically grabs every byte from the disk, in order to look for those files that have been deleted. So one of the things that I'm going to be talking about is like, we're going to remove these things, but then eventually I'll show you. And by the way, before doing all this removal, one of the things that you're going to want to do is actually zero out these files. But I have an article. Let's see. Do we have a good way to share articles, or should I just pull them up? Let me move my screen around and get a little screen share going here.
Cool. Do you have any tools that are able to do a memory acquisition in the secure kernel? Any forensics tools to do that?
I don't know.
Cool. It's been a question I've had for a bit now.
All right, let's see. My screen's being shared.
Yep.
And there we go.
It's up. Yep.
This is just a virtual machine that I have. It's actually for my class, but it's the one I use for all my lab stuff these days. So I'm just pulling this up, and I'll pull up this example article here. I'll close that. Mozilla has been updated. And here's an example of using MS Build in order to implant a Cobalt Strike beacon into memory. So a standard build profile for like a Hello World application is right here. Pretty simple stuff. And then you'll see the difference where we simply just have a classic.
Hold on 1 second. People are saying that they can't see your screen, but I've shared it and I can see it.
Yeah, I can see it too.
That's really odd. Let me try to unshare it, share it again.
Okay.
I just added this back to the stage. Any luck now? I know it takes a second for comments to be posted, but it is being shared. And if I can see it, you all should be able to see it. That's crazy.
Dun, dun, dun.
No, they say they can't see it.
All right, let me kill my share and start it back up.
Okay. All right, we'll try resharing, and then if that fails, I'll ask you, Ryan, to just jump off and then jump back on and see if that works.
Cool.
All right. Wallpaper is shared. All right. I just reposted it. Right now, you should see a browser window for Internet Storm Center with some arrows and text.
Ooh, it worked in our testing. And you can see it on your side, right? Still?
I can see it fine. They're saying they still can't see it. That's really odd. Do you have two screens? So I guess what are you seeing right now on the screen then, from your view? Are you seeing Ryan and I smaller and then just a big empty space? Might be YouTube itself before one of you needs to disappear. Let me pull myself. All right, I just reshared everything. If this doesn't work, I'm just going to ask. Oh, now you can see it? There it is. That's weird. So,
okay.
Wait, who said that about YouTube? That doesn't make any sense. It's just like turn it off, turn it back on. The light. It's black background with the arrows like it's trying to share. No browser window. Okay, they still can't see the browser window. But some people say it works. It's up now. Oh, man, this is crazy. We can see now. Okay, I'm going to go with that. I see many people saying they can see it. So let's move on. Thank you for letting us know. Let us know if it happens again.
Yes, and by the way, folks, as I'm going through whatever, if you have any questions, like just pop those suckers in there. So in this case, the MS build project is simply using kernel 13. Here, I'll actually zoom in here. We've got virtual protect utilization, and basically down here, we've got the Cobalt Strike beacon just being pushed into a buffer. So the more that you can live fileless, the better. If you have a interpreter running in the environment in any way, shape, or form, and it's able to inject, like say you're running Cobalt Strike, rather than using, a standard execution, if you can use like reflective injection or something like that, that's your best way forward. Try to keep things off the disk. And if you're connecting via a windowed environment like RDP in general, good luck. But I do actually have a tip on that coming up for RDP, because a lot of threat actors are coming in via RDP now. I don't think a lot of red teamers are using RDP to just connect directly in and staying connected via RDP versus dropping something and then getting out to be a little more, stealthy. But you should see my VM right now. Hopefully folks can see the VM. Another thing I wanted to mention is that what we're seeing a lot of the APT groups do is they're setting up like a RAM disk, and they're using for like Linux machines especially, and they're dropping their files in there. If they're not just using like tempfs or /temp or something like that to store their files, hoping that they're removed upon session logout, pretty much.
What version of Windows is that?
What's that?
What version of Windows is that?
I don't know.
Some people are. Somebody commented, "Is that Windows 8?" Oh, it's Windows 10. Okay.
Windows 10. That would have been cool if I came with Windows 8 locked and loaded though. Fantastic. All right. One thing that I want to mention is that, if the organization has an EDR, they may or may not also have something like sysmon, which is trivial to uninstall the driver for. You can just use a sysmon installer literally and just say uninstall driver. And they may also have process auditing enabled, which is event 4688 in the security logs. Like if I were to go over here and go to my event viewer and then go to Windows logs, go to security, try that again. There you go. And then filter on 4688. If these have been enabled in the environment, then this is process creation auditing. And it can include the command line that was utilized in order to launch the particular process. So this is something that a lot of organizations will use either as a secondary or tertiary method of just ensuring they have process creation logged, or for that matter, this might be the only thing that they're using. So this is really easy to disable. And we see a lot of threat actors attempt to disable it. One way is by literally just using the following command line. See, I'll open up a prompt, give you a nice zoom on this guy, and zoom even more. Yeah, there you go. So I can basically use reg.exe to do a reg add. to the local machine system current control set, control audit policy, audit process creation, and just change that value to a 0. So if I run this, there you go. I just disabled 4688 event logging. So now the processes that are running are not being captured if that particular option was enabled. A more common situation that you see more so in larger organizations is that they have some type of EDR. Well, EDRs are actually kind of trivial to disable. A lot of them out there are trivial to disable. There's a number of tools available. Like I can literally just go to GitHub, or heck, I'll just go here to Google and I'll just type in EDR Sandblast. And I get this GitHub project. Here's EDR Sandblast. Another one is called Killfloor. And what they do is they're modular EDR killers that aim to use whatever driver, usually a vulnerable driver, that you provide in order to disable the security context and basically unhook the EDR. So this is just one of the types of tools that you'll see. What I've got here as an example is to show you kind of how these work. So there's one out there called Terminator, and I have the source code for it. It was just sitting on GitHub, and I got excited. So, no, it was actually on VirusTotal. Excuse me. I was like, that didn't sound right. But it was on VirusTotal. We'll open this up in Visual Studio Code. There's another one out there, for example, that is more of a closed source one. It's not more of, it is closed source. It's called StoneStop. It's associated with PoorTry. And that one's very good at disabling EDRs, by the way. But what these basically do is right up top, you'll see, let me zoom in a little bit for you. A little more. All right, we have our IO controls. We've got register process and terminate process. This is the kicker right here. And you'll notice, I mean, this whole thing is only, I'm scrolling to the bottom here, fewer than 400 lines of code, right? Pretty simple. And when it starts off, we go up to main. And one of the first things that it does is it looks for a system file, a driver that you've provided. And this is where the modular nature comes into play. So if you're familiar with like the lull drivers project or just any vulnerable drivers, because new ones keep coming out, being signed and accepted and so on and so forth, you just basically replace this information and then it makes sure that the driver is available. It tries to then load the driver and create a service to run the driver. And then what it does is terminates all of your security software that it can find. And it does this via a call to this ridiculously simple function where we run create tool help 32 snapshot. That's a weird name for identifying all the processes that are running on a host. It returns an array back that have all the different processes that are running. And then from there, it starts going through them and looking to see if they are in a particular list. So I'm on line 285-ish right now. Let me go back up to the top of this. They've included in this example a bunch of, well, I said in this example, in this code, a bunch of example names for processes like substrings that it might want to try to find. And if it finds some of those as it's going through and looking at the snapshot of running processes, then it's going to invoke its ability to basically stop that process. And in order to stop the process, it invokes device IO control. It provides the terminate process constant that we saw up above, which is the IO control for stop the process. Don't let it run. And if it's able to do it, then it says, hey, I terminated that one, on to the next one. And that's all it does. In this case, it's a very, very simple utility, but there are many of them out there. I just wanted to give an example of one because I had the source code for it and it was right here and readily available.
Yeah, that's cool.
All right. So speaking of being stealthier, we'll just start kind of at initial access, right? When you're using RDP in order to connect into an environment, whether you've actually just compromised credentials, you got some from some stealer logs, you know, whatever. There's this really cool feature. I should stop closing Firefox and just leave it open. And this, using RDP without leaving traces. There is a public mode associated with RDP. I just learned this. It was either today or yesterday. I don't even remember. I was not aware this was a thing. So if you invoke MSTSC with the public switch, what it does is it turns off a bunch of things that we use in the DFIR realm in order to trace activity and find out what happened. So some of your event logs are still going to be there. So if anyone's familiar with like Windows Event IDs 21 through 25 in the terminal services provider, or if you're familiar with standard 4624, a user has logged on and look for the logon type of 10 for terminal services /RDP, those will still fire. But things like credential caching is disabled. You've got bitmap caching is disabled. And if no one's ever seen this, I want to show you this right here. One of the things that we use in order to basically try to analyze what's occurred via RDP sessions is to use the bitmap caching. So first and foremost, I'll show you that if I run MSTSC and I show options under experience, there's this guy right here, persistent bitmap caching. So what this does is it actually writes little 64 by 64 pixel tiles to a database that lives on the machine. And it works kind of like video compression. You know how video compression, it doesn't redraw every single line, or for that matter, if it's interlaced every other line of a screen as it's changing. If that particular part of the string is static, it just remains, and then it updates what needs to actually change, right? What's changing in the video, for example. Well, that's what RDP does. And it uses this bitmap caching database in order to do that. These files are sitting on the disk. Here's the location right here. Let's just navigate over to it. It's in local app data. So we'll go local app data. Spelled that wrong. Hold on. And we want to go to Microsoft Terminal Services. We'll go to Microsoft. Oh, cute. I didn't use it on this machine, so it's not there. App data, local, Microsoft, terminal server client. All right. I didn't pre-plan for that. Anyways, these little database files, they look like this. They can be parsed with a number of different tools. And what they allow us to do is retrieve those 64 by 64 pixel tiles. And then we can create like a collage out of them. But don't get me wrong, you don't just redraw the entire screen. It doesn't work like that. Rather, it's like a huge jigsaw puzzle. And then you have to just look for keywords or script names or whatever that might be in there. But it can kind of give us a heads up as to what tools the threat actor might be using, what they're doing as they're connected, you know, what programs they're accessing, what they have in Notepad, et cetera, et cetera. Well, this public option just disables that. It just turns it off so that they're not stored on the disk. And then we can't use tools like BMC tools is the most popular one. RDP Cache Stitcher is another one. So that's kind of blinding us in the DFIR realm from seeing a little more about what happened via that RDP session. Oh, here's the example of the tiles right here in the article. Could have just scrolled down to that. All right. And most recently used servers. It doesn't update this list. So that's another place that we can basically go and check in the registry to see what MSTSC connected to. But if public mode's enabled, then it just doesn't get updated. And some additional stuff. You get the idea. So there's this public mode. Check out this article. It's good stuff. It's called Using RDP Without Leaving Traces, the MSTSC public mode. So if you need to connect via RDP, then public mode is the way to go about that. All right, let's get into the nitty gritty of things. I will minimize this time instead of opening that every single time. So we have, at SANS, we have a number of posters that we provide. And one of the posters is called Windows Forensic Analysis. I'm not trying to shill for SANS right now or like, oh, look, more SANS stuff. It's just the fact that this poster has become like ubiquitous within the blue team realm. Whenever we engage in a case, many times we're checking the things that are on this very poster. And so if no one's ever seen it, it's a free poster to download, Windows Forensic Analysis poster by SANS. Okay, whatever. But what I want to show you is, for an example, we have a section here called Application Execution. So one thing is called shim cache. And this is the application compatibility that Microsoft basically tries to shim in to provide a better user experience. But what it does is whenever an executable is executed, it can save up to over 1,000 of these entries and basically say this was run, this was run, this was run. Here's the location on disk, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this poster example is like, all right, well, what do we have here? Well, the Windows timeline. Whenever I use a timeline feature in Windows, when I open items within an application, I can basically just go here to this file and parse it with whatever tools available and then get data from it. So this poster is a really good example of all the things that Windows records while you're carrying out your activities. One place that is very handy to go kind of dig around in, and I'll just use regedit. Yeah, I'll just use regedit for now. Is, for example, under local machine, software, Microsoft, Windows NT, current version. Actually, one sec. Let me look this up. Oh, I don't have to look it up. It's right here in the poster. I want the run MRU. Where is that? Last visited MRU. Software. That's a good one. Under Explorer. Okay, this is what I want right here. So Windows contain catalogs a lot of things that are referred to as MRU. It stands for most recently used. This one's a last visited, which basically shows directory and application access. There's another one called the run MRU. So whenever you hit Windows R and you get the run dialog, and if you execute a command in there, it stores that in the registry. And there's this place in the registry. I was navigating to the completely wrong location, by the way. But if I go into software, Microsoft, current version, Explorer. All right, let's go back. I want current user. Duh, Ryan, it's per user. I should have known that. So I go to software. That's for later. Ignore that. Microsoft, Windows current version, and then under Explorer. Here's a place where, and by the way, I can't change the text size in regedit, but I will zoom in when I want to show you something in here. So for example, there's this run MRU. So let me zoom in. The key's name is run MRU for run most recently used. Whenever you're on a machine and you start typing commands in here, like I typed regedit to open regedit, right? To do what I'm doing right now. In fact, you can actually see regedit right there in the list. It's right there. You can see when I was running mstsc in there, you can see, well, I cut it off with my box, but you can see command.exe in there. But some pen testers will go in here and run like PowerShell commands and think it's a bit, stealthier because they're running it from directly the run dialog. But in reality, that's being stored right here in these registry keys. So one of the cool things about these registry keys is if you go to delete them, they just go away. And then now they're gone. So that's one option to clean up your tracks, is basically doing that. Some of these artifacts have methods that you can utilize in order to actually flush them out. So like, let's talk about shim cache. So there's this particular guy right up here. Let me scroll up as the example in the poster. There you go. It sits in the registry under app compatibility. Well, we have a number of tools that we like to run in the DFIR realm on the blue side. Many of them are actually referred to as Zimmerman tools. So I'm going to open this up. This is Eric Zimmerman, who creates a bunch of teams for the blue side. If you've never seen his tools, you want to check them out, just go literally Google Zimmerman Tools Forensics, or probably just Zimmerman Tools, also known as EZ Tools for Eric Zimmerman. The tools are designed to parse particular files or databases that provide information to incident responders. So if you're on the red team or red adjacent, and you've never actually seen those particular tools, just looking at the tools and reading, well, what do they parse? What registry locations are they parsing? I need to go clean those up after I carry out my activity. What database files are they interacting with? I need to go clean those up and zero them out and delete them after my activity. There's so many things in here, but one example is like if I go to open up a prompt, and I'll zoom in for you here. I always spell that wrong for some silly reason.
Couple questions for you when you take a break.
Yes, let's do them now so I don't get too far ahead of myself.
Yeah, sure. One is asking, what's the Linux equivalent of the registry on Windows? Is there one?
No, not really. No, everything's just a file in Linux. So I was going to get into Linux towards the end here, but really in the Windows realm, most of the stuff that we use in the blue team is sitting in the registry or is sitting in a database file shoved somewhere in app data or local app data. Typically, those are the locations. Whereas in Linux land, typically it's just logs we have to deal with. And they're much easier to deal with because a simple sed inline replace or sed remove X number of lines, because many of them are not actually locked, will just remove those logs, those lines from the log files, and then your activity is kind of hidden.
Yeah, dmessage on Linux shows you a lot too with the logs. Another question, I mentioned volatility, but someone's asking, are there any good tools to perform memory forensics and identify fileless malware, especially when traditional file system analysis is insufficient?
Oh, volatility is king. It has been since I started, really, and it still is. Whether you're still using the 2.4, which you probably shouldn't, or using version 3. Velociraptor is a tool that we use in the blue team that basically allows you to deploy an agent to a system and then browse the virtual file system or collect files from it. Typically, that will then be parsed by one of the tools like the one I'm using now, Zimmerman Tools. So that has a memory collection capability, and I really like that also. So if you've never seen Velociraptor, you may want to check that out.
And the last question I saw was about they're trying to remember this term they heard, because a registry is so complex and there's so many little things, and it's probably impossible to find every little piece. There's a way to like merge it or compress the registry or do something like on Windows so it kind of kills everything. Are you familiar with that?
No, I'm not really familiar with it. One thing that I will mention, though, is speaking of the Eric Zimmerman tools, there's a tool that he has called Registry Explorer. When you browse the registry via regedit, you run into a lot of like encoding where it's either like wide character or UTF encoded, or you'll see where it's actually like ROT13 encoded. Microsoft does that with a lot of their registry keys. But if you use the Registry Explorer from Zimmerman, he already has a listing built into the program of all those locations that make it difficult to read inside regedit, and then you can just read them plain as day using Registry Explorer.
Nice.
So check this out. This tool is called App Compat Cache Parser. And what it does is it parses the application compatibility, which is what we affectionately called shim cache. I think that term was coined by Mandiant back in 2011, I want to say. And we can just run it. Like, I'll just steal the command right here. You come to me. And I don't want that. So I run it, I get a list of 1,024 entries, and it's just, I pushed it to ctemp. So let's go check out ctemp. This is an example of a file. In this case, it's using the system hive. So this is an example of a file that we on the blue team would acquire. We grab the registry hives, system, SAM, security, etc. And we then parse it with tools like this. Well, shim cache is one of the most heavily used items for artifacts for us to determine, well, what's running the system. So you can see that once I parse the system hive, I can go to my file sitting in ctemp, and this should open with another Zimmerman tool, actually, that we use for browsing CSV files called Timeline Explorer. It's just looking at a CSV. I can open this up in Excel or whatever. But you're looking through here, and boom, this is all the stuff that's in shim cache. If I was running nefarious things, they would also be in here. Oh, hey, look. I didn't even notice that was going to be in there. There's CCleaner right there. Right? So we have 1,000 things that have been run. Well, oddly enough, Microsoft has 2 DLLs that are just sitting on disk that allow you to run an exported function from them in order to flush the shim cache. So after you've carried out your deeds as a red teamer, you can run something like this. Run DLL32.exe. This is the DLL sitting in system 32. And this is the exported function. It's just native on the system. And it's called shimcat or shim flush cache. Gone. I have another one. There's actually a second one that you can run. Kernel 32 base flush app compat cache. I run it. Shim cache actually updates on system restart. So what I'm going to try right now, and we're just going to hope that this works, is I'm going to restart the system after running those two commands. And once I restart, I'm going to rerun the app compat cache parser, and you'll see that now, instead of 1,024 hits and all kinds of your little hacker tools that you've dropped on the box and executed, we're not going to see them anymore because they've been flushed out. They're gone now. There's actually a really good article on this. Let me look up the name of it real quick. Oh, it's just Google shim cache flushing, and you'll find a great article, which is where I got these commands. So we're just going to wait for this sucker to come up. When it does come up, I'm going to show you that the shim cache is gone, and then we're going to go into removing command history. We'll be looking at PowerShell, and then we'll be looking at clearing event logs outright on the Windows system, which is actually trivial to do. So now my system's loaded back up. I'm going to log back in. And I'm going to run the app compat cache parser again. As soon as my icons orient themselves. Good enough. Windows are overlapping, but let's just move on. So let's go to that ctemp location. Here's the previous parsed shim cache data. Sitting at, what are you installing? No, stop it. Just move you over here. 117K for, how many of those were there? 1,024 hits. We'll just call it old. And then let's go right back into tools. And then I'll go over to Zimmerman tools. We will pop a command prompt here. I meant to go into the net 6. That's all right. Easy to fix. And then app compat cache parser. And then we're going to run the same command, telling it to output the CSV to that particular directory. I right-clicked too many times. Windows doesn't like that. And now we have 41 entries. We don't have 1,024 entries because they got flushed. The 41 that are showing up are all things that basically loaded at system runtime when the machine was restarting. So now if I reopen my directory, VMware Tools is reinstalling. Oh, perfect timing. Thank you so much. That's restarting live. All right, here's the new one. It's only 4K. I open it up. All the bad stuff that I was doing is gone from shim cache now. And we'll see system initialization stuff, things that were running on start, et cetera, et cetera. These are process hackers installed, hash my files, contextual menu thing. It's loading on user session instantiation, basically. So flushing the shim cache is one thing that you can do in order to hide some activity. Another thing, in fact, do we have any questions before I keep going?
One question came in. I just responded to him. He said, is there a way to stop live sim logs? I just asked, did he mean stopping logging facilities from reaching the sim or something else? Unless you're familiar with what he might be asking. A way to stop live sim logs.
Oh, that would be probably similar to what the EDR silencers are using. So EDR killers are applications, typically malware, that will try to unhook the DLLs to terminate the processes, stop the services, etc., so that the EDR itself cannot function on the host. An EDR silencing method is basically, it usually has to do with network traffic, but it's rerouting network traffic such that the agent on the host, it's still running. Maybe you didn't have permissions or a tool to kill it, but it's not able to reach out to its cloud provider. So if you look up EDR silencers, there's a good Huntress article on it, silencing the EDR silencers. And it talks about using things like the Windows. Oh, you know what? I'm on the wrong screen here. Let me show you. Here you go. Here's one of the methods that threat actors are using to stop EDRs from communicating with their cloud-based tenants. One of them is like Windows filtering platform rules, let alone just using Windows Defender Firewall. So let's get rid of all the silliness. Go away. Sure. And it gives you a breakdown of how they're silencing the EDRs, but you can adapt this to something like the Splunk Universal Forwarder. Is Splunk uf.exe, right? Just set rules so that it can't communicate out. So that should, if you look up this article, it will basically answer that question of stopping the logs from getting to the logging facility. All right, my icons went all wonky on me, but that's all good. So what do I get for restarting? Okay, another thing I want to show you is that PowerShell is often used in red team engagements, right? Well, PowerShell keeps a history of the commands that you run. It's actually part of a module known as PS readline, and it's sitting in app data under Microsoft Windows PowerShell PS readline. So let's just go there. On my VM. Hey, there you go. And I want to go to, all right, calm down, Windows. We got you. App data, Microsoft Windows PowerShell PS readline. And in here, there's a file, this guy, console host history, sitting in this location. It is in the users directory, app data, roaming, Microsoft Windows PowerShell PS readline is the logging facility basically that PowerShell uses. So if I open up this document, let's see if it actually has much in here from, well, I better not open it that way. Okay, in this case, all it has for me is me launching Python to load a ransomware generator. And that's because I cleared it in testing and forgot to do more PowerShell before, so I can show you how to remove it. But basically, whatever you run in PowerShell gets logged to this file per your sessions. So one easy way to deal with that is to just delete the file because it's not locked. So you can toss that PS readline. Now, again, any of the things I'm talking about in the registry is actually its own file system, and it does actually have slack space. So it's not a lot of forensicators are looking at that. But in terms of just deleting this text file, a better way to do that would be to zero out the file first. So I'll show you that a little bit coming up because I still want to get into some more of these event logs. For Linux, it's simply just running a sed command and removing lines from a log file. It's as simple as that. And in the Windows realm, we have event logs. So I can go to the event viewer and I can go over to, for example, security. There's a ton of stuff that we use here on the blue team in order to determine what happened on a system, who logged in, when did they log in, did they impersonate as another user, did they connect to SMB shares, if SMB auditing and file object auditing is enabled, and so on and so forth. It's one of the primary, like just veritable cornucopia of data for us to use. Well, it's trivial to clear the Windows event log. So you'll see right now that I have a ton of data sitting here in my security event log. So you can see the scroll bar over here on the right. There's tons of stuff in here. Well, a simple command that you can run, and let me open up the command prompt and I'll run as administrator. And this easy command is using the Windows event log utility, CL for clear. And in this case, I want to clear the security log. So when I run this, I hit enter. And then if I go back to my event viewer, ransomware actors love this, by the way. And I go to security, ruh-roh, everything's gone, except, ironically, one thing, and that is an event 1102, which is a log clear. So there's evidence, hey, those logs were cleared, but the logs are cleared.
Yeah, it's funny. Someone just made a comment about that. Said, but if you use sed in a log file in Linux, the command will be logged. It'll be displayed in the bash history, just like this.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, so you'll see, oh, they manipulated some lines, but then if the lines are gone, like, well, what they manipulate, you're not going to know.
How well does CC Cleaner? I know like the first thing they're going to check to see is if somebody ran CC Cleaner, but if you run that, is it really good at pretty much cleaning all these artifacts up, or does it miss a lot of things?
It's pretty good, to be honest. It uses secure delete, so it zeroes out files before it overwrites them. It finds all kinds of stuff like your browser history files and tosses those.
Thumbnail cache is the worst.
Yes, the thumbnail cache. So for folks that aren't aware, there's a thumbnail cache that's basically sitting inside each directory hidden in Windows. And it, when you open up an Explorer, or here, I'll show you. When I open up an Explorer window and I see the icons, right? Well, these icons, their icons are generated by Windows to show me like, okay, this is the icon. It stores that into an icons.db file. In fact, if I just go into, for example, documents, and I go to view and I do this guy and I go to there and I say, don't hide protected files. I don't want you to. And don't hide that. Don't hide that. Show me hidden files. Let's see. So anyways, like a desktop INI, what were we talking about? I just blanked out completely.
Thumbnail cache.
Oh, the thumbnail cache. Oh, that's also in the poster. That doesn't sit in this individual folder. All right.
Yeah, it's amazing. You view like a directory listing with a bunch of icons in it. You don't even click on the photos, and all those photos are stored in the thumbnail cache, like years old. It's insane.
Another way to clear out Windows event logs, I cleared the one location. But if you do something like this, well, first off, I need to be in PowerShell, so stop myself. That's not the right place. No, just run.
Yeah, and someone mentioned if you use system automation, the system management automation DLL, does that get logged as well for PowerShell commands, or is that separate because you're not using PowerShell to interact with the DLL?
That is separate.
Yep, cool.
I don't know why I let that actually rip. I shouldn't have done that. But what I just ran was this guy. So via PowerShell, get win event, list log, everything. Just give me every log. Force it. Give me every log. Even if I don't have access to it, at least try. And then if I were to, for example, pipe this to something like this. Let me zoom in here. There you go. For each, run wevtutil, clear, and then clear that log name. I think this outputs like 1,700 different log names under all providers, and it clears every single one of them. I'd run it right now to show you, but it takes a while, and it's going to make my system slow down, so I don't want to do it. But another example of basically just using a living off the land tool to clear event logs. Do we have time for a couple more?
Yeah, sure.
All right, cool. Another thing that red teamers often don't realize, and for that matter, I've only known about this for about 2 years now. This actually hid from me for a while, but I'm going to open up my, I guess I should finally move this window over here. I'm opening up the Registry Explorer, but you could just use regedit, either way. And I'm going to load my live system. And I want to load up my user, no ransom. Let's see if this will load for us. Go to the root, software, 7-zip, compression. Did you know that when you compress files in a Windows environment using something like WinZip or 7-zip, that both of them have registry key locations where it's actually maintaining an archive history of the archives that you created? This would be another great key to go in there and be like, nope, get out. Because essentially by going into the archive history and reviewing it, you can see the archives that I've created on this machine. And if you're trying to hide that you're gathering or staging data, archiving it, and then taking it out, this is just yet another location where, we on the blue team might say, wait a minute, you made a zip file of a particular folder. And at the time, what was in there, we review the master file table, and then we kind of know. There's also extraction. So it shows path histories of extractions.
Mm.
This one's not parsing super well, but you get the idea. So there's one for WinZip. There's one for 7-zip. There's one for a couple other tools. Now I'm going to go ahead and just show the file zeroing out. So I'm going to go into, let's just see here. I'm going to go to C Windows. And I'm going to go to, where do I want to go? System 32, or do I want to go to event logs? Let me just show you a different way. Let's pretend that I brought a tool into the environment. And let's say, I'm just going to take Velociraptor. Let's just pretend this is a bad tool and not just the tool that I mentioned earlier on the call, Velociraptor. Right. So if I were to open up a hex editor and look at the contents of Velociraptor, this is the data sitting on disk, right? We have our MZ header. It's a portable executable. If I just go and delete this, what the NTFS file system does is it basically just unmarks it as a valid file in the master file table, which is a file that is a descriptor and shows where all the files start on the disk, but it doesn't actually delete the data. This data is still going to be sitting on the disk. So if I were to basically just delete velociraptor.exe, a forensic analyst could recover it. But if you zero out the file using a couple different native tools, I think I'm in Linux land. I got to stop doing Control L here. There's an example of using fsutil. This is shout out to my buddy Dre. He recently showed me this, and it's actually pretty awesome. So we have fsutil that is capable of manipulating the file system. And if we do, for example, like fsutil file, I'll zoom more in for you. There you go. Set 0 data, offset equals 0, length equals, how big are you in bytes? Let's just copy you. And get rid of you, and get rid of you. And then the file name. So we'll do, I'll just cheat. Oh, I guess I won't cheat. I lied. All right. C users, no ransom, desktop, velociraptor.exe. So I'm running fsutil, file, set 0 data, offset 0, the length in bytes that I just grabbed from properties, and then my file, and I hit enter. 0 data is changed. Well, what do you mean? Well, if I go into a hex editor now, notice the icon's also gone now because that resource is no longer in the file. But I drag this, again, this is our attack tool, right? Whatever. And I drag it over. Hey, look, it's all zeros now. So I overwrote those basically in the actual sectors. Now I can just go along here and say delete, delete. And if they try to recover it, they're going to recover a bunch of zeros. So that's one method, using fsutil. Another method is using cipher.exe. I'll bring up this article. I won't go through it. I'll just like hit one more thing and we'll wrap up because I could talk for days on this subject, obviously. But if I go over to this article from Velexity, I can see that like some Russian APTs were using Cipher. This is another tool that is built into Windows, just like fsutil. And this is how you encrypt files or directories on NTFS partitions. Well, if I have a folder, and in that folder, I stage my malware, my tools, my text files for copying and pasteability or whatever, right? Then I use this utility, and I basically just say Cipher, and then I give it a working directory. Say it's my directory after I'm all done with it. It'll encrypt that entire directory, and then I can just delete it. And kind of the same concept. That file is now not going to be recovered by a blue team like myself.
Good
and
stuff.
Then one more thing I'll mention here is that shadow copies can be created on the system. So the volume shadow copy service is very easy to manipulate. There are a number of different commands that you can utilize. I'll pull up an example right here. So these commands are what the ransomware actors use. They use the VSS admin, delete shadows all, and be quiet about it. So basically, if you're going to be deleting stuff, you might have had a volume shadow copy taken while you were on that box. And what we would like to do on the blue team is once you've deleted your stuff, you've zeroed it out and then you've deleted it, well, we want to go recover it from the shadow copies. So these are all different ways. You don't need all of these. This is just like, you could use one of these. These are all just different ways to toss the shadow copies. And if you're on a Windows server machine that uses Windows backup, and by the way, Windows has a backup feature built in on most Windows servers that you can enable in the properties. It just syncs files over to a different location. That's pretty much all it does. But I can delete the catalog, or I can keep 0 versions of the catalog. So these are examples of what the ransomware actors like to do right towards the end when they're about to push the payload. Is they'll disable your shadow, kill your shadow copies, disable your ability to actually recover by turning off auto recovery in Windows. You know, the new method of getting to safe mode, that weird, like if it fails to boot 3 times in a row or whatever, however that works. And then anyway, so there's just some other example commands, but I'll wrap up here before we get to any final questions by saying, again, you know, this what we call the red poster at SANS. If you're a red teamer, go, oh, you're a red teamer. It's the red poster now. It's red in color, but it's used by like all blue teamers out there, or at least these are the artifacts we care about. If you want to know some of the registry locations where you should go in order to zero them out, this is, just go here, just grab this, and then you can script it all out. If you want to, you know, think about like, well, shim cache is listed first. How do I get rid of that? Well, we covered shim cache flushing. If you want to know about this Windows timeline and oh, it's got this DB file. So whenever I interact with the start menu in Windows and do fun stuff in there, and it keeps it in the Windows 10 timeline, it's in this SQL file. Well, what do you do when you're done with your activities? You zero it out using FS utility. You encrypt it using cipher.exe, one of the two, and then just delete it. Just tell it to go away. So check out this poster. It could definitely help. And I think I'll pause for right now. Let me kill my screen share and see if we have any questions and whatnot.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Thank you. Adam A just mentioned alternate data streams. Is there any use to those in the forensics world, blue team world?
Yeah, they're actually easy for us to identify. So people like to store things in the ADS to think that they're hidden, but you know, we can trivially access those. Notepad.exe can actually open up files in the ADS, which is interesting. However, it is, you know, it's a layer, right? So if you're thinking of, should I be storing my tools in the ADS? Sure, go ahead. But then as you're zeroing your file out, make sure to pad it to make sure you're also hitting the ADS stream where that file's content resides. It's just the file content size will be the same. I mean, it won't matter. The ADS data is still there attached to the node. So you can just toss it that way.
Cool. Yeah, I just posted the link to the poster. I posted it earlier as well. I posted Ryan's Twitter link or X link, whatever you want to call it these days. Are you on Blue Sky or Mastodon as well? Or
no,
just,
for some silly reason I'm not yet. Yeah, I'm on X, which is what it is.
Yeah, Quad. Well, I guess we're talking about hackers, yeah, use Linux, but when you're compromising a system, it's more times than not a Windows box. So those are the systems where you want to go and make sure you're not leaving any artifacts behind. But certainly we could do the same kind of conversation on the Linux side of the house in the future.
Yep.
So cool. Yeah. And again, that the SANS Windows DFIR red poster is extremely useful. I've got a copy of it, like whenever I go on an engagement, because you forget about these things and the amount of information stored at these different locations. Like sometimes all it takes is you missing 1 or 2 of those little files, and then they're going to figure out, you know, information that you don't want them to know. Cool. All right. No, I appreciate it, Ryan. It was really great stuff. Love to have you back on again. It's interesting to get the perspective on the other side of the house. Like I said at the beginning, a lot of us think that we're pretty savvy and sneaky and transparent or stealthy. And when you look at the amount of data and telemetry and stuff that's stored, it's just incredible.
Yep. Agreed. Well, thanks for having me. I had a blast.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much. And next week, we're having a stream with Josh Reynolds on, it's called Ungarbled, Deobfuscating Golang with Binary Ninja. So that should be a pretty exciting one to watch as well, because a lot of people have been asking for malware analysis in different languages than the obvious one. So we'll take a look at Go. I'm talking to somebody as well to come on and talk about Rust malware in the future too. So if you have any requests, of course, I posted up the Discord link a little bit ago in the chat. You're welcome to join there. There's a couple thousand members. It's a great community with a lot of really helpful people and resources. But other than that, have a great weekend, and we will see you next time. Thanks again, Ryan. Appreciate it.
See ya.